Welcome to the Tuesday workshop here at Thinker Business Accelerator. It's Paul Edwards, one of our faculty members, and I'm Jason Todd. And today we've got some faculty members that are out. Naomi sends her regards.
We are always at a loss when Naomi is not available to bring her perspective to whatever we're discussing.
I did ask her what she might discuss today if she were to be with us. And for our new viewers and listeners, we just poll the universe and figure out what's circling around in our individual workplaces and with our people to find topics that are useful for our community on Tuesdays. This topic here, she said, entrepreneurship with and without the support of higher education or a regular 9-to-5. How does that journey look from different directions? So that's her thought. And we can go with that, or we can wait for her and venture off on that differently. But I think you and I have similar stories for how we got started.
I avoided it for a long time for that very reason. I kept saying to myself, but I have to have a job. I have to be able to pay the bills. If the only source of income you have is the one that you currently get from a job where you got to be there, then yeah, you have to make money from somewhere. In fact, the best thing you could do is to first move into a situation where you are still trading time for money, but on a self-employed basis. For example, if you're a writer like me, working as a journalist for a publication or inside a publishing house, and you can get freelance work and enough of it to replace your income from your job, and people start referring you, and then you don't have to show up at a job. I would say that's a good sort of bridge the gap where you're still paying your bills, right? You're not living on the street, but you're also moving towards the direction of being a independent, self-employed provider of a product or service that the market wants. And if that's not available, then I go back to what a mentor of mine told me at the time. So I was still in the insurance business, and we met for coffee one day, and I was saying, I think I'm done being in the insurance business, but I really don't know what to do. I would say that if I have a natural talent, it's with writing, but I don't know how to get started with this. And he said something I've never forgotten. He said to me, if you are not currently being paid to do what you're good at, then the next best thing you can do is prepare to be paid to do what you're good at. What he was getting at, and I didn't really understand it at the time, was find an opportunity to exhibit your talent. And when I say exhibit, I'm not talking about go set up a table at the county fair necessarily. What I'm talking about is exhibit it in front of the people who would be your customers, to give them an opportunity to say, hey, this is valuable to me. I would pay for this. So had I understood that better at the time, I probably would have done it more often, but it took a while for that to catch on. What I would tell someone who's looking at it now is if there's not a viable way to start getting paid independently for what you do, you start off by doing it for free for the right kind of people until they say, hey, would you be willing to do this? And then you can begin to look into, okay, how much does that do to my income situation? But I would never tell someone to jump off the deep end unless you have an independent passive source of income. You got rental income or something like that, and it can pay your bills, and you can just pursue this dream you have.
So it seems to me that what you're advocating for is keep a 9-to-5 or keep some steady form of income while you prepare for potentially making money from the thing that you really love doing, which will make you not only good at the thing you love doing and optimize or make that more efficient, even if you don't end up making money and converting all of your income to that income stream. But it also is preparatory work that if you begin to exhibit, you're prepared to scale that and make it your full-time income. That's what I'm hearing from you. I know that I've experimented with businesses my entire life. I actually have an order form that I found in a pile of papers and kids' things that my parents put in boxes and then sent over to my house many years ago. And I never wanted to open them because as soon as I see any of those old papers, I immediately feel that I should keep them forever. Among those old papers was an order form for people to order letterhead. This is probably from the late 1980s, where even the order form is on dot matrix paper and with the little pin feed rollers on the side. And that was my business probably when I was my young teens or less. I eventually went to get various jobs. And when I felt that I was tired of selling people on things that I knew would revolutionize their business, but they didn't see it, I was like, I'm just going to employ all of these processes and systems that I keep trying to sell people on. I'm going to do them for myself. And fortuitously got connected up to a guy who knew new products and services he wanted to sell. And I knew tech and marketing to be able to do it. The process started on nights and weekends from the first week of October 2002. By the last week of October 2002, I had written software to take orders online. There was no Shopify, none of that. I had to write all the software from scratch. And we took our first order to doing 50 grand that December online. We still worked full time during our day jobs. We'd take customer service calls at lunch, call people back. And then I think he went on full time, maybe middle of or spring of 2003, because he was single and didn't need as much income as me. So he went on full time. And then by the middle of 2003, I left my job and went on full time. So it could have been like 8 months or something like that, or maybe less, from startup to full time.
Yeah.
And then it was the two of us sitting in an office.
Yeah. We've talked on previous episodes about the appeal of self-employment and entrepreneurship. This is another one of those instances where I'm happy to burst your bubble. It's actually quite the opposite, but I don't want people to think that it's even worse than being worked 40 hours a week by the man. On the contrary, what you're really doing, if you have to go the route of working those extra hours, is you're expanding your capacity to handle what the ordinary people that you work with 9 to 5 every day don't have room for. They don't have an interest. They don't have an ability. They probably do, but they're not aware of it. They don't want to think about it. So if you have to build, code, write, manufacture, or perfect this product or service, you should expect that, not indefinitely, but you should expect that as the fee you're going to pay to acquire the capacity to do even more important things. I think I just look at some of the stuff that we're going through right now, building Emissary and putting together these workshops, dealing with 2 books that we're getting ready to publish, and all of these prospects that are popping up. We shouldn't be surprised that we're feeling a little bit stretched, that some things are going to get squeezed out by the efforts that we're making. And there's going to be a cost associated with getting what we want, what we're after, what the goals we've set. I think entrepreneurs who are successful, business owners who are successful, regardless of education, successful business owners just run rings around college professors and highly educated people in terms of how much value they create in the marketplace, but also in earnings. It's got a ceiling in terms of how much you can earn. And unless you understand marketing and spreading messages, it's also got a ceiling in terms of how much influence you can have. It's not for everybody, but if you hear what I'm saying and you think to yourself, that's what I want, and I'm willing to pay the price to get it, it won't be easy and it won't be quick, but it will be worth it.
I feel like one of the most difficult spots for an entrepreneur is to move from just them successfully making their money to then expanding beyond them as an individual. Some common hobbies that turn into businesses like woodworking. And I used to play around a lot with woodworking and have some people in my life that enjoy woodworking. And so I've been watching some woodworking videos. And one of the gentlemen talks about how his side hustle is essentially he makes full-time money at it. He makes all of his own furniture and smalls, things like trinkets. He employs his children, not to pay them, but to give them life lessons. He made tiny little, what he called squirrel tables, which just looked like tiny little picnic tables for squirrels because he had some scrap, but the kids sold them all. And so he at one point in time, maybe he made $1,000 a day or something selling these tables. The process is scalable to a point. He can work whenever he wants to and ease in and out of it. If he needs more money, he can work harder. If it doesn't matter so much, he can work a little bit less. The next step up to bring on the next person has to be done very carefully, because all of a sudden you start squeezing your margins down because you got to pay this other individual. You got to pay labor. And can your sales scale with that? It depends a lot on the type of business, whether it's I make stuff and I have limited time or resources to make that volume to get revenue and profitability. Or do I sell products? I've got an online store. I was blessed enough that my first real business was a drop shipping business. We sold products from a local warehouse and they agreed to ship all of our products. We were selling in our sleep. We could sell 100 in an hour of orders that we never spoke to a person about. That's a different scalability. We didn't need to have a lot of people. 1 or 2 on the phones for 50 grand in a month was fine. We weren't working very hard. And that's a hell of a deal. But to do that by selling hours, if I have to spend hours making stuff or talking to people, it's a different scalability. And I can move that in and out if it's just me. That's more controllable. But scaling beyond that is more difficult. So it's a sticking point for people. After getting started, how do you scale up beyond yourself? Or do you? Maybe you just keep it as yourself or keep it a very small team. I'm fond of that.
Yeah. That brings up an interesting thought, which is that as you're going along doing this, don't be surprised. I've certainly felt this many times. Don't be surprised at a louder voice or a stronger pull in both directions as it becomes difficult. What I mean by that is like the pressure you feel internally to quit will become stronger, but the pressure to continue providing the leadership that you have and serving the needs of the customers you have and helping the team you build, right? Making you feel as though they are quote unquote dependent on you. They're not. There's plenty of other places they can go and get jobs or income, whatever. But I have certainly felt that. I have certainly been in slumps and stuff like that where I've said, gee, it would be so easy to just say, to hell with this, and I'm going to go get a job again. But if I do that, there are clients who are depending on me. And now that we're in publishing, where there's ongoing desire to sell books that, over a period of time will be a couple of years old, several years old, and yet we can still sell them and market them and attract interest in them because we believe in publishing books that are timeless. You're going to need that track of consistency, showing up when it's hot and when it's cold, when it's good and when it's bad, when it's rough and when it's easy. If you're currently considering starting a business, one of the ways you have to do that is to practice, cultivate, and prove that skill to the marketplace in the margins of your life outside of a regular job or adjacent to a regular job. It'll accustom you to the marathon track that you're getting on. And I'm not trying to tell people once you get into a certain line of business, you can never get out of it, and it's always going to be that way. I'm just saying it becomes more and more difficult, particularly if you succeed at it, because of what it empowers you to do and who it empowers you to work with. The longer I do this, and every time I take on a client to write a book, it gets more interesting. One of our clients said, "You're getting paid to learn all this stuff." I said, "Exactly. It's the coolest job in the world." I would pay double what I'm getting paid to a university to take classes on this, which wouldn't educate me all that much. Instead, I get to learn it from a grade A expert, and I get paid on top of it. If you're starting out, this is data from further down the tracks that you can be vigilant about, but also look forward to. If you get traction and people paying you to do it repeatedly and establish a reputation and people begin to refer you, it's also a lot of fun. It's a huge honor. It's very validating in a lot of ways of the talent, but also the character that you bring to what you do.
Yeah, I like the long-term outlook of being an entrepreneur. I feel like sometimes folks who work a 9-to-5 job, they're working throughout the day, they go home and they're done at the end of the day and over the weekend. That's fine. But I think some of the opportunities that you're afforded when you become an entrepreneur are the connections. And I think of the podcast Coffee with Humans, hundreds of people around the world, fascinating people, fascinating stories, all sorts of things that I've learned. The What Works podcast that I started 2017, 100-something episodes of fascinating lives and connections to people. Those have paid off in big ways at times. If I didn't put myself out there for those connections, there's a lot of opportunity that would have never happened in my life. It doesn't need to be tied to a dollar. It's being able to make the phone call to somebody who produces shows and sells them into major networks. I have those connections and I can make connections. I recently made a connection for somebody, said, you got to go talk to this individual. All the stuff you're working on, they can totally help you take it to the next level. Mm-hmm. Now, I didn't make a dime off of that and I wasn't looking to. It's a joy to be able to connect people and see their dreams go forward. The person I was able to get connected, once in a while when he's stuck, he calls me up and talks to me about all the things that are going on. And it's my pleasure to be able to help him through those stuck points, and not for the money, but to be able to have those broad and deep relationships. I think it's something that entrepreneurs are uniquely positioned to develop in their lives, and folks who work a traditional 9-to-5 are not as positioned, I think. And that's, again, there's no right or wrong in any of this. It's what do you want out of your life? And like I talk to entrepreneurs, tell them that the fastest way to make money is to get a job. Fastest way to lose money, start a business.
Yeah.
But the road you go down is one, like we talked about before, of the greatest self-development opportunity you will likely have outside of, let's say, marriage. And that you really can't put a price on that. That pays off in some very amazing ways that you could never buy in college. And it's all the stuff that you didn't expect, which develops a lot of value that pays off over the long term, 20 years from now, let's say.
I want to tell a story here that I told Sam Feeney the other day. He's the career factors guy who helps you figure out what's the real intrinsic motive that you bring to work, and why is it that you can have a cush job that pays you 6 figures and tons of benefits and still be miserable? It's a good question. And I think this story is useful for the person who's in that set of circumstances, right? They have a dream one day of starting a business. You don't really control your own schedule when you're a business owner. Anyway, here's the story. I think you're a business owner long before you actually own a business. It's a state of mind. When I was 19, I got a job doing photocopies in an office. It's extremely boring work, but had to make some money. Went and did photocopies in an office. And while I was there, I noticed that they had posted a couple of opportunities for permanent positions. One of the positions was word processor, typist. And I'm like, I can type well. I've been all my life. I applied for it and they were happy to hire from within. And my boss knew me and she put in a good word for me. And lo and behold, I went out of the photocopy room and got my own desk where I was typing insurance documents all day. When that first started, we were in Pasadena, which was only 15 commute from where I lived and much more central. I started off working 9 to 5. And then they moved, this is Pasadena, LA. And then they moved from Pasadena to Rosemead, which was much further south. It was in a business park in a very nondescript area that didn't have a lot of amenities or restaurants or anything nearby. And so you went to the business park and they told me, we want you to work 11 to 7, which effectively ruined my evenings as a 19-year-old guy wanting to hang out with my buddies. We were in a band. We wanted to rehearse. And now it was basically work all day because by the time I got up, everybody was on their way to work. All I did was work. And the only free time I had was the weekends. It felt like a huge drag. I would literally wake up in the morning when my alarm went off, and the first thing out of my mouth would be, I hate work. It was not a good time. But this is the mindset of that time of my life as feeling very much a victim of my circumstance. Feeling very much like a cog in a machine, like a pawn on a chessboard, being moved around by invisible forces I didn't understand. And it didn't last very long. I hated it so much that I decided to resign and accepted a lower paying job at a music store from which I was fired a month later. That's part one of the story. Part two of the story is 2 years later. What's happened in between these two stories is I've gone and pretty much ruined my life, but I rescued by the opportunity to live with a mentor who was a successful multimillionaire who had a physical malady that I could provide some muscles to help him. And then in exchange, I got to live with him and absorb his wisdom and all of that. And so 2 years later, I get to London. And the interesting thing about London is at the time was that I wanted to go get a job and I started applying, and everywhere I applied, they said, have you got a bank account? I said, no, but I can go get one. And they said, okay, it's all direct deposit. I go to the bank and the bank says, have you got a job? And I said, no, I'm applying for them. And they said, we can't give you an account until you can show that you're employed and you have utility bills and all this kind of stuff. So it was a vicious circle. Couldn't get a job without a bank account and couldn't get a bank account without a job. So I was living with an older cousin and my uncle at the time, and I told them, I don't know what to do. I can't get a job without a bank account, can't get a bank account without a job. So my cousin called the bank, and he was really good at arguing with people. And so he argued with them until they were willing to grudgingly issue me this basic bank account. My uncle said to me, I'm working for this chain of health clubs in the financial district of London, and we need people to pass out flyers. So if you'll do it for £10 an hour, you got a deal. And I said, you got a deal. But by this time, I had this mentality of ownership that I had acquired from living with that mentor that last year. So he gave me this stack full of flyers, and I start talking out loud to Londoners passing by in this loud New York accent to attract their attention, just for fun, passing them out flyers and stuff like that. And I had a ball doing that job. And you talk about a job that most people just stand there like statues, right? Passing out a flyer. They don't even look at you. But I was making light of it. I was making joy out of it. I was actually having a fun time doing it. The first thing that needs to change is not that you'd leave the job you're at so you can go and own a business. The first thing is you own the job you're in so that you prove worthy of owning a business. And until you do that, you might as well not bother, because you're going to get into business ownership and you're going to blame everybody else around you when it doesn't work out, which is not how business owners succeed, because all business owners face failures and setbacks. If they blame anybody other than themselves, that's not a recipe for success, and you're going to hate it. So own the job you're in before you try to go and own the company that you work for.
That's great advice. One of the things that stands out for me in this is that many times people want to start businesses because they don't want to be told what to do.
Yeah.
Which is certainly a valid reason to start a business. And I look at it like this, that when my children were younger, one of the things that they needed to do as a chore, as a job, perhaps, in exchange for having a good living situation, was they need to take out the trash. That trash needed to be taken out. I don't remember what day it was, every Monday night or something like that, at the latest Tuesday morning. And they would sometimes argue with me and tell me, I don't want to take out the trash. Okay. Whether you want to take out the trash or not is irrelevant. It needs to be taken out. So if you don't like taking it out on Monday night or Tuesday morning, like I've instructed to you, if you don't like that time, it doesn't change the fact that the trash needs to be taken out. And if you leave my house, you have to do a bunch of other things too. And so sometimes people are stuck in jobs and it's really just they don't like to do that thing at that time. They think, I want to do it when I want to do it. But when you want to do it, it doesn't change the fact that it needs to get done.
Yeah.
And so many people who embark on an entrepreneurial journey are critical of their employer to begin with. They're like, I'm tired of working for the man. And then when you become the man, you find out, oh no, not only do I have as much responsibility as I had working for these other folks, but now I have all of the things that I didn't even know existed.
Yeah.
And so it's not that a person can't be successful in starting that way. There are some very successful people who started that way, but they knew that they had to learn these other skills as well. They knew there was going to be this time of growth. They wanted to choose to press into that growth rather than I want to escape all of this stuff, all of this complexity of my job. I want to escape the accountability of my job. That is not a successful way to start a business. So I love what you're talking about. Own the job that you're in. If you can own your job, you could probably own the other positions that you're going to need to wear when you are running your own business. You are an entrepreneur.
One of the things I found really frustrating about working for the man was, in fairness, right? Very few leaders make the investment or take the time to become truly good at communicating, which is the number one skill they should have. So what you crash up against coming into an environment as an employee is that even if you're trying to do a good job, because so few leaders are really good communicators, many times the expectations are, you don't necessarily know what they are, or you don't understand why we have them. And so for an employee, it's even someone who's pretty good about all the basics, showing up on time and doing what's expected of them. When leadership is so rarely good at communicating, often what you end up with is a series of maybe expanded or unexpected responsibilities that you're like, this wasn't in my job description. Which is fair enough, right? Because it wasn't communicated to you. But then when you suddenly come into the position of ownership, right? Now you start to appreciate, you start to think, wow, I thought it was just, I got to set my own schedule, but actually that trash needs to be taken out on Friday, just like it was at my old job. The only difference is now I have to enforce that standard and embody it. And in the early days, I have to execute it too. Even though I thought I was getting the opportunity to flip the world the bird and say, I'll take out the trash when I damn well feel like it. You begin to appreciate, I think, the failure. You can empathize a little bit better with the failures of the people that you worked for when you're wearing the hat. Because you realize on an evolving basis, right? There's stuff right now that you and I are working on that we have a theory for. But when we get there, there's going to be new expectations and new realities that pop up out of that neither one of us saw coming. And we're going to have to adapt to that. And we may not have the budget to simply throw money at it. We may have to do it yourself. Even though we've got great writers on our team and I hire them to draft our projects, I go through the developmental process and I realize there's more we can say here. We can really amplify this, but it takes time. And I'm not being paid extra for it, right? I'm doing it because I understand the importance of excellence in what I'm doing. And getting that over to somebody who is being paid to do the drafting for me is a repetitive, monotonous process of communication. And you wish you could just say, hey, by the way, next time, will you add another couple of thousand words of some idea that I thought of brilliantly while reading your work. You can't just ask somebody to do that once. You can't even ask them 100 times if they don't understand. You have to model it and be aware that some people learn one way and some people learn another, and you've got to be flexible and versatile in your ability to teach it. And all of this has taught me so much and given me such an empathy for the people I used to work for, because they had a very clear blueprint many times in their head of what they wanted and no idea of how to communicate it. I don't care what your business is, right? It could be something simple like widgets, but at some point you're going to run into chasms of misunderstanding between yourself and the people you lead. And then starts the really difficult work of explaining what you mean, clarifying what you mean, soliciting feedback on what you mean, and being prepared that you might not like the answer because it exposes the fact that you didn't even think of it because you were an inexperienced communicator. Yeah, I could say more, but that's one of the most profound lessons I've learned further on down the tracks. And I want to make an aspiring business owner aware of coming to a theater near you.
Google had a fantastic idea. Sergey Brin and Larry Page, fantastic idea. And they closed a $25 million financing round with Sequoia Capital. This was a couple of years after they launched in 1998. After they closed their $25 million financing round, they were told, you got to hire a CEO. Neither one of you are capable of running the company and managing the opportunity that you have in front of you. That's essentially the message, right? So they hired Eric Schmidt, who would run companies. And this video tells the story of a time when Google needed to hire staff and they were going to grow significantly. And Eric said, no, you can't do that, because when you're going from 50 people to 300 people or whatever it was, it's going to be a different management style and you can't do it that fast. You'll lose the culture of the business. You'll lose track of all the tasks you have. You can't do it that fast. We need to slow it down. And so he gave them all, he said, we can go from 50 to 100 people or something like that, or 100 to 150 people, but you can't go from 50 to 300. And he gave them all coins, Larry and Sergey coins. And he gave them to the managers of each major department and said, you can hire this many people this year. That's it. And now you can exchange your coins, but when your coins are gone, you don't get to hire anybody else. What happened was magical in the culture of Google at the time. The people in charge of sales, tech, hardware, they began a black market for exchanging coins. And they started working together. So if tech was like, hey, we got this cool thing we can make, but we need somebody to sell it. Okay, I need 2 programmers and 1 sales guy. I'll exchange you some coins so you can go you can get your sales guy. But I'm going to need these 2 coins from you. It created an efficient mechanism of the team working together to scale the organization. A couple lessons come out of that. Number one is there are skill sets that you need to develop to manage your team. Larry and Sergey were not ready as young entrepreneurs, tech-heavy dreamers, to scale a company that started with $25 million of seed capital. They needed somebody skilled to manage the growth of the business. And so they took a back seat while Eric took over. They didn't use all the resources that they could have. They used the resources they could manage, and they scaled down the resources to keep them manageable by giving the coins, putting a limit on what you can hire. Do you have the money to hire more people? For sure. However, managing is not an issue of money. Managing is an issue of relationship and culture and systems and processes. You don't need a lot of money to develop systems and processes. You could dream them up and whiteboard them tomorrow. Eric knew that, and so he created scarcity to protect the processes and systems as the organization grew. If you're an entrepreneur, connect yourself with somebody who can help you run the things that you've not run before while you learn them. Larry Page took over as CEO a long time later, and they hired Sundar. The next thing is, even if you're hitting it out of the park, sometimes you need to manage scarcity to keep focus on the thing that really matters. Don't let the fact that you can mean that you should. So maybe your business is wildly successful and it's throwing off a lot of cash. Doesn't mean you need to scale it if that's not manageable for you. Maybe you need to slow things down and invite the wisdom of somebody else to manage through this particular time. And that goes for whether you broke off to start a business because you can't take orders from anybody else, you're going to need to learn to do that. Because like we talk about all the time, you maybe become an entrepreneur because you feel like you're not going to work for anybody and you find you working for everyone.
Yeah.
And I think you made mention of once you start that ball rolling, it's hard to get it stopped, whether it's successful or not. It's hard to get a business stopped, especially if it's been successful.
I mean, if the relationships that you form mean anything, and I believe they do, right? I'm not like that. I wouldn't want to tell my clients, I'm sorry, I can't help you anymore. Especially after I told them I could. It's different if I'd never told them that to begin with. But told them I could, told them I would, followed through and actually did it, impressed them, got them to tell their friends, got referrals, recommendations, and now you want to give up? What kind of guy are you? That's been some of the stuff that's kept me going. What am I going to tell my clients? These kind people who've reached out and recommended people to me, I can't pull back on that. So, yeah, you might even be doing really well. And then you have a different set of problems, which is, can I do this thing? Yes. Should I do it? I don't know. Maybe I should. Who do I turn to? How do I know? Where do I start? If you're listening to the weekly workshop, I have an answer for you. You need to join the community. Be a part of Thinker Growth. Right?
Bring it home, Paul.
Better another praise you than your own mouth. That's what we're here for, right? If you're hearing stuff that makes sense, that's really helpful. I hadn't even thought of that. If that's what you want and you want more of it, if you are, particularly if you are a business that's looking to get to sale number 1 or go from 1 to 10x and expand, that's what we've experienced. That's what we know how to do. We can recognize pretty quickly whether or not you should, just because you can. And we can also help you see, hey, you're not quite ready for this. The reality is you're not going to find what you're looking for by becoming a business owner. You're in fact going to have even more people telling you what to do. They're just not going to tell you what to do the way a boss does. They might ask politely instead of commanding, but you're going to have even more obligations and responsibilities. And the more you succeed at it, sense of duty to keep going. So if you don't want any of that, you're wasting your time listening to this, I guess is what I would say.
Yeah. This has been a insightful time recapping a bit of your journey, a bit of my journey, and why people get started in entrepreneurship. You don't necessarily need a degree to get started in entrepreneurship because it really is about ownership mindset. If you have an ownership mindset, you can either learn the things you need to learn or find the people who can help you along the way, particularly if your business is either struggling, you'll need somebody to give you insights to get through that, or you're successful. You'll need insights to manage that. Everything else in between, you can probably do that. And it will be the biggest adventure of your life. Perhaps the greatest source of personal development. But starting a business and running that, right? This has been what's that?
Oh, no, I don't mean to get philosophical here at the end. It's a brief philosophical, but I think if you're coming at this from the same Judeo-Christian angle that we do, that's why the Bible has so much to say about male-female relationships and monetary relationships, but it doesn't say very much about how to be a better tennis player or make a nice pizza. Are those things that human beings do and can get better at? Yes, but the Bible doesn't say anything about them. Why? Because they're replicable. You can, once you learn how to do it, you can do it. Marriage and business are not like that. We don't talk much about marriage on this show. Maybe we should at some point, at least as an analogous example for conversation.
We can certainly touch on at a future time, we can certainly touch on the relationships that entrepreneurs have and their spouses, because unique relationship, all of them need to be managed.
Your unspoken business partner, besides the IRS, is definitely your spouse. But that's for another episode. And what we've just talked about is for this one. On the weekly workshop of the Thinker Growth community, my name's Paul Edwards, and this is Jason Todd. We'll see you next time.